Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Rich Shortall. I'm the Executive Coordinator of Fire Safe Marin. This is our fourth webinar / workshop. We're calling them workshops because this is an opportunity for all of the residents who live in the different zones of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, there are 5 of them, to hear about the various projects that have been undertaken in their region and to ask questions about the people who've been managing these projects. Tonight, we're going to focus on the West Marin area. For those of you who are interested, there is an opportunity to ask questions. All you need to do is go to the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and just type in your comment. I'll remind you when that time comes up, and then we're happy to respond to your questions. Our big focus in all of these programs is adaptation to wildfire. We all need to adapt to wildfire. We know that we're going to have wildfire someday, where it's not Smokey the Bear anymore, where it's prevent all wildfires. We have to adapt to them. And that's what all this programming, that's what all these projects that are funded by the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority are designed to do. So tonight I want to introduce Captain Jordan Reeser from the Marin County Fire Department, who's going to talk about some of the projects that they've been doing in West Marin. Jordan, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Rich. I appreciate it. Yep. And so the West Marin, as far as, is just to give a little geographical reference to people, we consider West Marin is kind of from White's Hill area, right? Leaving Fairfax, going up White's Hill, all the way to the border with, as we go through Tamales. So it's quite a large piece of property in the county. It's by far the largest zone in the NWPA as far as the different zones for areas that work is provided in, right? There's 5 different zones, and we are the Western zone. So the Western zone consists of Marin County Fire Department. It consists of multiple volunteer departments, Inverness, Bolinas, Stinson Beach, and that would be it. Actually, the 4 of us compose the West Marin, and then Nicasio, but they're actually part of Marin County jurisdiction. So we collaborate and coordinate with one another during planning processes to how we're going to utilize the project dollars, and generally just organizational opportunities for pre-fire as well as during incidents, coordinating with the chiefs and the others associated with all the departments. So the interesting thing about it as well is that the Western zone, even though it's by far geographically the largest, it by far has the least amount of dollars associated from the MWPA, because the MWPA is collecting and distributing its proportions of funds based on where the funds are collected, which is based on square footage of property taxes received. So even though the West Marin area has the largest area with some would argue the highest risk for large fire growth and intense fire because of the vegetation and the large areas of undeveloped land, it receives by far the least amount of money from the MWPA to do that. So what we've been really trying to target on, like many of the other zones, is working on, kind of supporting the house out approach, supporting people's efforts around their homes and within their communities and with their neighbors, and then evacuation route corridors. And a lot of the evacuation route stuff for us in West Marin is also really about access for fire equipment, right? During a wildfire event or other events, these roads were historically not built for current vehicles or fire equipment. So they're very narrow in a lot of places. They were original, buggy roads, literally, back when the properties were developed and the roads were initially put in. So there's a lot of challenges, not only associated with the evacuation, but also for what creates the issues with fire equipment and other emergency personnel trying to gain access during a wildfire or other events. So we've been really focusing these first couple of years on evacuation routes and supporting communities and individuals with their defensible space through our inspection program, as well as trying to provide assistance to those who need it, because of their physical limitations or maybe fiscal, or some of the property owners who have much larger properties than a typical lot, and for the good of the community, if we can help them support doing vegetation work on a larger scale than just around their home, that's going to help the community as a whole, we've been trying to gear towards that. So we'll show a couple slides here. I think the one last note I'd like to make is that the challenge in West Marin right now, we haven't been able to really dive in head first with some of these, because most of the zone in the western zone, or most of the zone falls under the auspice or permit control of the California Coastal Commission. So with MWPA and their Panorama Environmental Group, we're hopefully finally making our way through some environmental compliance processes that will allow us to do what most of us would consider basic work. We really haven't been able to dive into even evacuation route clearance because of some of the coastal zone requirements in wading through that. So needless to say, though, we've been doing a bunch of work in the coastal zone where we can. We've been doing work in the Casio area. We've been doing a lot of work in the San Geronimo Valley and in the Point Reyes community, as well as in and around Muir Beach, which is actually in a different zone. But we've been kind of helping them out on the community side as well. So if you could, Jen, just start with an example here of a couple of our slides I have, kind of showing what we're trying to do. So you can see we have a couple that you can see the vehicle there in the background. This is one of our access dirt roads. And you can see this is a before and after. And you can see, it's a pretty significant change. The vegetation growth rates is always going to be a challenge, but you can see we're really opening it up, increasing our sight lines, increasing clearance, and hopefully minimizing or reducing fire behavior along the road edge there. You can see, especially on the downslope. So the white, I think that's a Toyota 4Runner or RAV4. I mean, it's for a size perspective, you can see it's kind of parked in generally the same spot in both pictures, maybe a little off, or the angle's a little off, but the same piece of road. So that's really kind of, from an entry level. So there's no homes on either sides of this road where this exists. So where we have the opportunity where there aren't fences in people's gardens and stuff, this is at a minimum what we're trying to do, just to really create some good working conditions for firefighters, and hopefully, or if needed, safe egress and evacuation for residents in the neighborhoods. You can show the next one, Jen. Just another example we have of some examples of in a community, right? Just kind of doing our ladder fuel lifting, not doing extensive clearing of native trees, right? Those are all coast redwoods there that we've done some lifting on the right? Really just trying to improve sight lines and reducing fire potential along the roadway, right? So we cleaned up all the down and dead material on the road edge, and then lifted our ladder fuels up to create kind of a nice open area where we then can see, you can see on the picture on the left, we wouldn't even be able to see into that property there with the orchards and the dry grass. Once it gets dry, it's green in this picture. Really, the sight lines is a huge piece for firefighters, so we can see if embers are landing and starting spot fires off of a road, that we really can visually have as far as a sight line as possible, so we can see what's going on. You can see in the left picture there, right, if there was something happening even out in that meadow, or there is a home in the far back picture, you can see there. This picture I think is in Lagunitas. And that really helps us with the sight lines and visualization, as well as hopefully reducing some of the fire intensities that may occur along the road edge there. So you can go to the next one, Jen. And here is another, this is an example of some work we're doing in San Geronimo on some private property. This is actually the old San Geronimo Valley Drive, which is now a part of a private ranch here on the west side of Whites Hill. And we're basically doing a bunch of work. This runs parallel to the current Sir Francis Drake Boulevard for a little bit until you get to the Woodacre turnoff. And this existing old roadbed, we're trying to reopen it up from an operational perspective so that we can use it if we have a fire that's burning interior on the San Geronimo Valley side, on the Woodacre side, that we wouldn't have to then clog up Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, because that's a narrow road through here. So we're kind of providing an operational opportunity here that hasn't existed in the past. You can really see this. You could, I don't have the before here, and I'm sorry about that. You could barely drive the machine down the middle of it because the brush was so thick, right? Just about barely a car width wide. So we're really creating a great space that we can use into the future. And working with the rancher, they're going to then bring goats and eventually their cows in here after that to help keep the vegetation knocked down. And they have some other equipment they'll be using as the maintenance. So they'll kind of be the maintainer of this. And then it just really provides some excellent opportunities. And actually, about where this picture was taken was just behind the photo was where we had a fire last year on White's Hill that burned up the slope. And luckily the conditions weren't such that it got too large and we were able to pick it up very quickly. But it's still definitely, it was trying to make its way up onto the watershed. So it strategically makes a lot of sense. So we're not only looking at kind of our general community protection in the way out, but this really allows us an opportunity to create a space where we're not going to be clogging up the main evacuation route, because we would need to use it as an operational road. And that's something, I think a lot of times we don't have that option because, the fire trucks and whatnot may be needing to work on the same roads that people are using for evacuation routes. So we're really trying to take advantage of this. So to the right of that, I think Sir Francis Drake Boulevard is just maybe 100 feet to the right of those oak trees. You see there's a little drainage and it goes across, and that's right at the top of White's Hill. So this is a really exciting opportunity, and the ranchers are really supportive and inclusive and being great partners in this. And it's going to really hopefully help us in the future, or at least know that we have this opportunity that's there. So you can go, Jen, you can go to the next one. And this is an example of an oak woodland we've done some work on. This is actually in a similar area along the ridgetop on some private property in an oak woodland. And this is kind of what we're hoping. There was a lot of poison oak and broom and other understory stuff. And this is kind of our end state. There's actually that we would like to see in some of the oak woodlands, right? This kind of creating this really nice park-like setting. There was a bunch of small diameter Doug fir that were starting to encroach and starting to actually, negatively impact the coast live oak, as well as the madrone and the bay laurels. So from a forest health perspective, it creates a good keeps our diversity in a good place, creates these mosaics, and also creates a really safe firefighting condition. This is on a ridge top. To the right there, the top, if you would walk through that little stand of coast live oak and bay, there's actually another road on the top. And then there's a main infrastructure cell tower that leads to. So this was a critical area that we did some work with some private landowners on, and really had some great results. And it looks really nice. And from a firefighter's perspective, it's a good anchor point for us right now. We're going to continue to do work, and knowing, for our firefighters to know that there's some safe places like this up on the ridges is going to be there. It's going to be much more conducive for them to think that they can get up there and to take actions, because there's a lot of areas on our fire roads and surrounding our communities that has really, degraded is not the word. It just hasn't had much management to it. So there is a significant amount of vegetation and growth in our roadways. The fire roads are not maintained to the historical standards by many of the private property owners and land management agencies. So I'm really creating a hazardous situation for firefighters, right? And coming in from other areas as well as from the county here, responding to some of these, maybe a remote fire in the watershed. Well, we need to have good access, and the fire roads were put in for a purpose, right? And that purpose was to fight fire from, or to access fires. Those roads weren't put in as access roads or mountain bike trails. So we need to start having the conversations about how we get some of these critical fire roads, not all of them, back into safe working conditions. And we're hoping, by doing some work on some private land, we can start to set that example to some of the land agencies and others that will start to give the visual, because I think a lot of people are really concerned about maybe what things might look like when they're different from they are now. And, so hopefully we can create some areas that we can showcase what we want it to look like in oak woodland, or if it's a Doug fir redwood forest, or if it's in some heavy coastal chaparral, which exists up there that's pretty decadent. So there is, I think, one last slide here that kind of gets to this point. There's two more, maybe the other one didn't make it. So this is our fire trucks. This is on a non-county maintained road in San Geronimo Valley. You can see it's on Cuesta. I can't remember the cross street there, but you can just see some of the challenges there, real from, the fences, which I know out in West Marin and Inverness and other places, has similar conditions. The property lines, especially on the non-county maintained roads, right? Maybe the property boundaries aren't as they aren't looked at closely on during building and other things as they are on county maintained roads, right? The jurisdictional stuff comes into play. So you can see the challenge of getting some of our equipment into some of these places. It's an issue, right? And you can see this is just to drive down the street, right? It needs to have a spotter, and this is on a nice clear afternoon with no stress, no smoke, no rush. And and you could see there too that there's no other equipment or persons in vehicles are going to get past that fire truck, fire engine, and vice versa. They're not going to be able to turn around. So we've been really focused in the San Geronimo with the CAL FIRE grant, focusing on evacuation routes on non-county maintained roads. And the primary reason there is that the county is responsible for maintaining the clearance along the county maintained roads, and will hopefully encourage them in the future here to do a little more of that. And we might need to participate as well in helping them do that. So I think, Jen, that's the end of the pictures there. I was hoping I had one more, and I'm not sure what happened to it. There was a really interesting picture of some vegetation. I'm going to actually see if I can't email it to you right now, Jen. I'm sorry for the last minute. There was a picture I wanted to show of some fire road conditions. It's pretty typical of some of the areas we have in and along I'm not going to be able to do it. It's unfortunate. So I can try to maybe get that to you, and we can look at it if someone has a moment, because it really captures the challenges from firefighters' perspective, right? So much of what we're looking at, I think, in the other zones is really this kind of urban reality, right? And supporting the WUI along the WUI boundary and supporting the homes and the communities. But, in West Marin, as Rich's picture kind of depicts behind him, that's kind of the start of it there, looking down into the Ross Valley, and it only gets more and more forested and more vegetation as we move west.
Well, Jordan, thanks very much. That was a wonderful presentation. The pictures are very powerful. I think as sort of a theme that we've heard in some of the previous workshops, and I think you hit it hard here, but maybe you can elaborate on it, and that is doing the work of fuel reduction to reduce the impact of wildfire and forest health. It seems like they go together really well. Can you elaborate?
Well, they do. And I think, myself, like I was a forestry major, and I worked for the National Park Service for almost 25 or 28 years in the fire management arena, which is really about the National Park Service, and many of the large landowners, right, are really focused on the forest health piece. That's the key component of fire, right? And the exclusion of fire for so long, and the exclusion and the disturbances for so long because of our firefighting actions and our general kind of processes, has really impacted the potential health of our forest. One is not only because so many of the communities and species here are fire dependent, right? They actually depend on fire for rejuvenation, regeneration, resprouting, nutrient recycling, all of these things. And in addition to, many of them actually require or really need fire as a mechanism to regenerate themselves, right? Their seeds are, it's called serotinous, right? Where they're some of the bishop pine species on the coast is one of those. And then many of our chaparral species, they all sprout from the stumps, and they love a really good hot fire to kind of burn out the vegetation and give themselves a kind of natural haircut and let them resprout again and do it all over. And Rich, I think it's interesting too. The other piece that people forget is that there's all these other species of plants and the seral stages post-fire that don't ever get an opportunity to present themselves because there's no fire disturbance, right? And when the chaparral has a nice hot fire that burns through it, there's all kinds of annuals and perennials that are living in the soil, the seeds, right? That never get released in this old decadent chaparral model. So you have all these species kind of lying in wait, right? They're looking for their chance to go through their cycle. So we got to be careful that we don't forget about the rest of the plants and stuff and everything, that fire is a really critical component. And we also obviously need to juggle that with safety of people and lives first, but hopefully we can start to create a balance, because they are hand in hand, the forest health, landscape health, watershed health, and fire management and the actions.
That's great. Just a reminder to the audience as we move on, if you do have any questions, please take advantage of that Q&A function and type them in, and we'll be glad to get to them. Another thing that I see that it's such a theme in the work that you're doing is evacuation route clearance. Evacuation, I think, remains the #1 concern for Marin residents. And when I see the work that you're doing, it looks like it's twofold, both being able to get people out safely and be able to get fire equipment in. We saw how narrow those roads were. Can you talk more about what kind of evacuation route work is being done throughout West Marin?
Well, I mean, we're really just focused right now on kind of that corridor along the roadway, right? Because, you know, some of it's been impeded upon by planted, you know, ornamentals as well as natives and others. And it really is a challenge, Rich, as I mentioned, you know, these roads weren't developed for modern kind of equipment and people. And so when you look at, you know, I live and have born and raised in West Marin, and, you know, knowing so many of the roads, they're just not cut out for it, right? And barely, you know, to get a vehicle, as you saw in there, to get a vehicle, let alone a fire truck, around some of these roads on a normal condition type day, it is a challenge. So we're really trying to help people to give them a sense, but not to give them too much of a comfort to say, oh, your evacuation route clear, everything's going to be okay, right? This is like minimum entry level stuff that we need to do as a community, and making sure that they have their pre-planned evacuation, they have their go bags ready, and that they have somewhere they're going. And I think in West Marin, we're fortunate enough, right? We have the Bay, we have Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, that, you know, that people not are only thinking about how they're getting out of their, especially their hillside communities or their little streets, but where are they going to, right? It's not this kind of keep driving scenario, because they need to kind of hopefully maybe have an end point that they're trying to get to. So part of it's just really trying to educate people, and everyone, you know, is really wanting answers, right? And this is the kind of thing, there isn't an answer. Some people only have one way out of their house, right? One street down, but there's some other, you know, situations where you need to be adaptive and make sure you're prepared to deviate from your plan. So, because that plan may be cut off for various reasons by fire or trucks or other people. So we're really just trying to kind of, at the entry level, create as much space as we can to allow as much passage of vehicles and people to get out of these fire prone areas, down to the flats, down to the Bay, down to the open area along Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, down to a local ranch or a parking lot. And that's kind of been our first focus. And then hopefully, as we develop that, you know, we'll be able to expand a little more and create some more maybe areas within communities that have a little bit more clearance for pullouts and turnarounds, and maybe even in some areas that we can have people shelter in the future. Instead of trying to go somewhere, we can have them go somewhere locally that is well mowed and maintained and in a good space.
Wow, that's a good strategy. We didn't really get into it, but I believe there is home evaluations being done for residents in West Marin. Can you talk about how that's working out there?
Yeah, so we're just starting to kind of, we are part of the kind of larger collaborative with Ross Valley Fire, Central Marin Fire, Kentfield Fire, and all the West Marin agencies. We have this great developing and kind of evolving defensible space inspection program, and we will start to be moving west as we transition here throughout the year. And many of the residents in Marin in the West Marin have received defensible space inspections in the past. They're going to start to look different because they're going to be accessible via your computer or tablet or whatever it may be, with a lot more information on there, very specific information about your property, about, you know, the individual, the hazards that are showing up specifically, with good pictures and good descriptions of maybe some of the things you can do to help remedy the situation they're seeing on the ground when the inspectors are out there. And then as we transition into the future, Rich, I mean, the next part's going to start to be, as we're working in other parts of the county, is how we enforce some of these, because some of them are state fire codes, right? And I think it's critical that we don't become a policing agency at all. This is very much a collaborative effort, educational effort. But when folks continue to kind of not take care of the basics, then we're going to have to start addressing that in a different way, because it's not only the threat to them, but it's the threat to their neighbors, right? Your neighbor, you can have the best defensible space in home hardening, if the neighbor right next to you, which is only 40 or 50 feet away, hasn't done much and their house is susceptible to fire. Once their house ignites, the likelihood of your house igniting is significantly. So it is about this kind of cumulative approach to trying to make the whole neighborhood safer. So the inspectors will be out this summer and engage with them, and there'll be a lot more information that you're going to receive, that you're going to have access to. And we won't be doing follow-up inspections this year in the Marin County jurisdictions, but I'm anticipating starting next year, we'll start to do some follow-ups, especially for the most egregious of properties.
Great. So as we all know, one of the obstacles to getting people to take the action that they need to make their property safe and their neighbors safe when they do that is financial. Are there grants available to help people out with that?
Well, the grant program we have right now is there's a lot of reasons we're not doing one locally within our zone. We're taking advantage of the MWPA grant program. We're directing people to that. But I think we have a different approach here in West Marin. Part of it because it's a much more of a, I think the communities are a little maybe closer knit and a little, because they're not so large, right? We have a little bit more interaction with our communities. So we're also providing direct assistance to people, that have that in essence can put forth a good case, right? And we're not super picky because we really want to help people, right? So that means a lot of times either we have some opportunities to send our own fire crews out to help people, but also to send contractors out. So we're kind of that, what we're calling the AFN, access and functional needs. But we've been helping a lot of people in the San Geronimo Valley and starting in Inverness, especially, some of those who have financial challenges or physical challenges. We want people, just the same note I mentioned about the neighbors, we want every house to be as safe as possible. So if we can help one person who's having challenges getting the work done and getting their house as safe as possible, and that's helping their neighbors on either side, that's a win for everybody. So when if the inspectors come out and you're seeing them, and you and the homeowners, or maybe of a neighbor or someone in the community who needs some help, please feel free to reach out to our program, and we'll definitely get back to you and engage any community members who might need some help.
Well, that's great. And as you point out, the challenges in West Marin really are quite different than in other parts of Marin. And it's great. They still can apply for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority grants. Go to the website for that. But direct assistance, where you'll send out a crew if it's really necessary to help them out, that's a wonderful service that you're offering.
And it's been received really well, Richie, you can imagine. And everyone's obviously super thankful, and especially the neighbors a lot of times, right? It does create a little bit of a community, because so much we've learned from so many catastrophic fires is the importance of a good community, even if that community is by street, if it's by, like when you start talking geographically, how that looks, it can differ, but like just making sure that, people know who their neighbors are and know what their needs are and know who needs help. And I think all of these things we can start doing can help to build that where it doesn't exist and make it stronger where it does.
Great. Well, I've got two more questions for you. The first one is, you've done all this work out there. What are you most excited about or most proud about what you did in the last fiscal year?
Well, the one thing I didn't mention is we did end up helping support the the processing and getting rid of vegetation is a challenge. And so one of the things as the West Marin group, we decided to really, that was important, was to continue to support that. And, we have the West Marin compost out at in the Costio that is they're taxed, to say the least, with material, and we're going to help them out in the future. But we did help out the Bolinas and Stinson Greenways facility, because it's kind of a quasi community government supported by the fire department. So we supported them with a new front loader to help them process and make the compost. And it really is improving their capacity to process material. So I forgot to mention that on what we'd spent some money on. But I think generally speaking, some of those photos I showed you, Rich, of where we're starting to do some work with the collaboration of private property owners, who are really understanding the importance of community fire protection. And they're very much engaging with us to do some of this critical work on their lands. It's really exciting, because hopefully it's going to set the tone and provide those examples where everyone will be able to come out and see and feel and walk amongst it, and including some of our land managers, who I think it would really it's going to hopefully benefit them to see, and the people who maybe have who are concerned about some of the impacts of some of our open space lands, not open space being the district, but just generally our public lands, that they're going to be able to kind of, hopefully we'll be able to bring them along and say, look at how this feels, and look at how healthy everything is now that we've done this work. So those larger pictures you saw, the oak woodlands, and then that work along the roadbed there, really excited about it. Just engaging with the community more than anything. Like we're doing a lot. We have stations all over the county, so we also, we have a lot going on in Throckmorton and Marin City, and it's really the station out approach too, where we're encouraging our captains to engage with the communities and come up with projects. So they're coming to us now with, we were talking to this neighborhood and they would really like to do something here. So I think we're really starting to develop the wider community-based kind of involvement in the decisions too, and setting some priorities based on some of their identified needs, and maybe a little bit of their fears too, which is okay. And then we're able to kind of get in with them and help to alleviate some of that, and also alleviate some of the threats and the risks.
Well, as you know, I live in unincorporated Marin myself, and you
Yeah.
and I have worked together on some of these types of projects. And again, I think this is some of the uniqueness of West Marin, which is, and that is the public-private partnership is very strong out there. And I think it's a real positive as you described it. So here's my last question for you. So coming into next year, is there anything you're particularly excited about as a forthcoming project?
Well, I think the most exciting thing is hopefully the best news is speaking with some of the consultants today is we're finally going to have the compliance in place to start engaging with some of the evacuation route clearance in Inverness, in Bolinas, in Stinson, in Sea Haven and other areas that we've been wanting to do, but we've been on hold with MWPA funds. We've been able to do a little bit of work. So we're really excited that we're kind of going to get the green light to do some work in some of those areas after a long year of kind of wading through the compliance piece. And then, we have some grants coming along too that aren't attached to MWPA, continued grants to do work in the San Geronimo Valley and Nicasio Valley. And we're very much engaged because of the jurisdictional stuff in the Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, which, has some county jurisdiction on it. And we're really excited about that opportunity. And I don't know if Todd Lando and discuss that as part of the Ross Valley piece, or the Central Marin, but really exciting collaborative opportunity that I think Rich and everyone else is really hopefully going to set the tone in the future for how we need to start looking at how we manage the landscapes as it relates to forest health and fire protection, because these little jurisdictions, fire is it doesn't recognize jurisdictional boundaries. And I got a question, Jen. Hey, Jen, did you receive that email with that picture attached?
I did. Would you like me to?
I would. And I think, Rich, if you have a sec, this is one of our fire roads on the Ridge that was just taken 2 days ago when we did a fire road tour. And I think you can see that is what if you looked at a map, a fire department, that would actually show as a fire road, right? And you don't have to be a firefighter to understand that that's not a safe place to be accessing a fire. And that's a pickup truck and not a fire truck, right? And this is what would historically be considered a fire road, right? So hopefully we can start, and I know that the land managers are in tune to this, but there's some challenges. So hopefully we can start, because this is also a huge concern of ours, is firefighter safety, right? We want to stop the fires before it gets in the community if we can. And if we don't have our historic fire road network in place to do that, then we really are relying on the defensible space, which we don't want to rely on defensible space, because that means the fire's in the community and the firefighters are in the backyards using the defensible space to protect their homes. So hopefully this is an image I think that's important for people to see, because most of us don't get out in the wildlands around our homes beyond kind of the immediate. There are some people who obviously enjoy hiking and other things, but this is not an atypical or a non-typical, whatever. This is very typical of some of the areas that we would consider fire roads. So firefighter safety for us is also paramount and as we move forward.
Well, thanks, Jordan. As we go through these workshops, these before and after photos are just worth 1,000 words. And it really, I think, reassures the public about what we're doing, how it's ecologically sound, and it really is make a difference. So keep taking a lot more.
Yeah, I know. We have a new program. We actually have a new 360 camera that we recently purchased because we realize the importance of capturing these images before, during, and after we work, and then into the future, because we'd like to track it 1, 3, 5, and 10 year to see the recovery and how things look, and then also the maintenance that's needed in some of these. So it's high on our priority list to start capturing more of these photos as we start to do more work on the ground.
Well, I think this is a good project for Fire Safe Marin, working with everybody to help collect all these, make them into montages and meaningful videos that we could put out for everybody. Yeah. Well, with that, I'm going to thank you very much, Jordan. That was a wonderful presentation. Really appreciate your taking the time. Want to thank all the audience that were able to make it tonight. We appreciate that. All this was recorded. It'll be available shortly on our YouTube channel and on our website. And again, thank you very much. It was, as always, very enjoyable. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Good night, everybody. Take care.